all standing in the ruins, wearing hard hats and smiling. The artist Lucas Cranach was the court painter of Frederick the Wise, Luther's ruler, and he lived in Wittenberg and was a close friend of Luther's. The group in the photograph had been trying for years to get the crumbling building preserved. The woman I met in the church is now the director of the Cranachhofe, a fine restored building and still a citizens' initiative which invites people from all over the world with some or no artistic experience to come to stay and to spend time creating art in the studios. On the Wittenberg town square later that day, I ate eggs and fried potatoes with her and with the pastor, the comforting dish that always reminds me of the old East. The pastor told me about the weekly protests calling for the Judenschau to be taken down, and spoke of his shame at preaching in a church which, as he said, insults another religion. I couldn't get the pastor's question out of my head, which I now understood differently. I felt I had to think again about Luther's anti-Semitism, even though I had written about it before. Was it a religious as well as a racial hatred? And if so, how far did it contaminate Luther's theology and his concept of the Church? The event reminded me why I was so gripped by Luther and why I was fascinated by Germany, the imagination and creative idealism that it took to found the Cranachhofe, the openness of German society to outsiders like me, the matter-of-fact way in which learned academic debate was just expected to be part of a congregational discussion after a service. No one, not even a pastor in a white collar and ruff, is immune from having their sermons scrutinized and debated, and Lutheranism remains a profoundly non-hierarchical, non-structured denomination, just as its founder Luther had no formal position in the Church and was only ever a professor of Holy Scripture. In the end, I too will have my views assessed, and I hope that my view of Luther's masculinity and his knotty character may open up the discussion further about how we commemorate great men without losing sight of their frailties and violence. Introduction. The anniversary of Luther in 2017 was not just an event of local Wittenberg history or even primarily of the Lutheran Church. Because Luther has so long been linked with Germanness itself, the event was a secular commemoration as well, an occasion to ask about what being German means today. Even though the country was formally reunited in 1989, the difference between the former East and the former West is still unmistakable. The East remains noticeably poorer, and 30 years on, its idealism is different too, with an abiding commitment to equality and communitarian values and an ingrained suspicion of the power of the state. If the anniversary were meant to do anything politically, it was intended to bring East and West together. Yet those formed in the education system of the East approached Luther very differently. They wanted to know about the economic side of the indulgences trade and the wealth and status of those who supported him, topics which were not really considered during the centenary celebrations. They asked different questions, too. Scholars from the former East who worked in monument conservation, for instance, undertook the archaeology on Luther's house and transformed our view of the family's wealth. But far from uniting East and West, it felt as though the questions and outlook of the former East was often silenced during the anniversary year in favor of a more anodyne commemoration of the Reformer as the translator of the Bible and inventor of the German language. Celebrating Luther has often been politically fraught and linked to questions of German identity. The first centenary of the 95 Theses was celebrated on the eve of the 30 Years' War, the catastrophic conflict that unleashed a generation-long religious and political military struggle and left much of Germany devastated. In 1917, the posting of the 95 Theses was commemorated in the midst of war and on the brink of revolution and defeat. Now, in a reunited Germany, with the commemoration happening on the territory that had once been that of the former East Germany, celebrating Luther was also an attempt to escape defining Germany's history solely in terms of Nazism and the Holocaust, to find, that is, a usable past. How Luther was commemorated was therefore a question of